Welcome to Sachs Realty's Tuesday night podcast, where we talk about anything and everything real estate. Each week, we deliver expert information enabling you to make better informed decisions while keeping more money in your pocket. If you're interested in real estate, this is your show. Guys, welcome to our Tuesday night podcast. Well, I tell you what, in our town, it is cold outside. It feels like winter is definitely here. This is March in Maryland. We never know what we're going to get. 65 degrees one day, 30 degrees the next. We got to have a great show lined up for you tonight, guys. We have a very special guest, Ron Trzcinski, one of our own here at Sachs Realty. He is a very tenured agent. And Melissa, of course.
Hello.
How are you guys?
How are you?
Hello.
Doing well.
Yeah.
Glad I could make it. I know I was there. There was a.
You were down to the wire.
It was a slight risk.
Yeah, but we're happy you're here. So happy you're here. So happy Ron's here again. He did a great time on our show before, and excited to have him back and get his insight with his expertise and knowledge and how long he's been in the industry. So we're excited.
You know, it's always a surprise when we find out the Fed is meeting Congress. And, it was just a couple months ago, everybody was hopeful. This word pivot came into play where everybody was saying, oh, he's going to pivot. Mortgage rates are going to be great again. House prices are going to continue to skyrocket. There will be no end in sight. Buy now, because next month you may be spending $25,000 or $30,000 more. And as we find out, it's not playing out that way. So we have a Fed that apparently has a backbone and is prepared to do. I mean, I don't know where it was last year, but apparently now he has a backbone that he's going to continue to put the pressure on interest rates. Hopefully, we'll start to see some deflation, not just disinflation. But guys, we're going to have a great show here for you tonight. We want to take your questions and your comments. Chat them in. I can already see the comments are blowing up. We're going to get some of Ron's expertise as well on the market. I know, Ron, you have some interesting things you want to cover and talk about tonight. So let's go ahead and dive in. Melissa, it's been a long day, hasn't it?
It's been a long day. We've been with each other the majority of the day. Ron too. So
yeah, we have.
It's been a busy Tuesday.
Morning meeting, and now here we are this evening.
That's right. We've been working on the show for tonight, and every week it's something new. I mean, that's just how real estate is. Every week now the interest rates are on the way up. We'd like to hear from you. What's going on where you live? I see Jeff M, given a play-by-play on, asking prices are $50,000 over where he lives. So, it's going to be interesting to see. Ron, what do you want to start with tonight?
Well, we frequently talk about supply and demand, how many houses are out there versus how many buyers there are. And we've been in a market where there's been low inventory. So the supply side has been very low. But there's another element to all of that. And we've dubbed the show, if people read about what we were talking about today, about whether there's a housing supply problem or not. And this gets past just the supply and demand and starts to look at affordability. So you may be in a community where they have a whole lot of new homes that have been put up, and you would say, oh, well, there's more homes available than there are buyers. But when you throw affordability into the equation, you say, wait, let's not go too quickly on that. And of course, in those communities, what you're seeing is builders who put new homes up, they might be dropping the price of those homes. Just as an example, and I don't know what's going on as far as the housing goes there, but we've all heard in the news how Google laid off 10,000 people. Well, maybe the builder said, oh, this is the perfect time, given the expansion that we're seeing in Google. They probably had fairly decent incomes. I can put in a new home development here. The jobs are here. Suddenly, all those jobs aren't there. And he's saying, now who do I sell these houses to? And the remaining people, unless those people found jobs in that community, a good chance that they relocated to some other place. Maybe they moved to Seattle or Portland or whatever. Those homes are sitting there and they're saying, we've got to lower the price. When we look at housing supply and whether there's a problem or not, when they look at that equation, in fact, there was a recent study done by Fannie Mae. And Fannie Mae, of course, is a nationwide organization. Their numbers are going to be related to nationwide. They estimated that there are, and this is keeping in mind, affordability is part of this. There are we are 4 million houses short of the amount of houses that we need from an affordability standpoint when you throw that into the equation. Now I question this number, but what they did as far as they call it a burdened household if your mortgage payment, basically your mortgage, which includes property taxes, insurance, let's say a HOA or a condo fee, and then your principal and interest, if that is 30% or higher, then they consider that a burdened household. Now, keep in mind that number doesn't even include the other expenses that you get when you move into a house, which many people are finding over the last 2 years who moved into houses and skipped home inspections, things like maintenance on the house. They say, whoa, a house needs a new roof all of a sudden. Those aren't included when they're talking about the housing expense. They're just talking about the mortgage payment or your rent if you're renting. So that number, when you look at that number, that's where they're finding now some people disagree with this number. I have seen some reports from organizations that basically support builders. Instead of 4 million, they think the number is closer to 2 million. But keep in mind, they're representing builders. So their number might be more related to just new homes. If you look at some cities, especially older cities like Baltimore, probably Detroit, there are lots of vacant homes in those communities, which can be added into homes that could be turned around and turned into available houses, affordable houses. So the guy who looks at it from the builder standpoint might not be looking at these alternatives to new homes. So,
Ron, and we've talked about, just to, interject a little bit, we've talked about a lot. It's sort of, it doesn't make sense for builders to build affordable housing with all the red tape and, all the expense that's involved in breaking ground in the community. And this is a big problem that we have in America when we're talking about, and you hit on a very good point, because a lot of people, and I've seen it in the comments in recent shows, when we're talking about, a population that's in decline, we're in some of the lowest population growth that we've seen in 30, 40 years. And when we see that people are having children later in life, and we're not seeing the big families that we used to see, 50, 60 years ago. And, when we're looking at the amount of houses that are out there, a lot of people will jump in and they'll say, well, we're in a glut of a housing market. We're in a glut. We, have a lot of new construction, just like you said, in areas where, they were expecting these higher white collar employees to be able to afford these $700,000, $800,000, $900,000, in a lot of cases, pricier than that, way above the national median household income level. I think of like $75,000, like the median income, level nationwide. And when we start looking at the affordability index, the HAI, Housing Affordability Index, and then we start looking at, people can't afford these houses, it doesn't matter that there are a lot of empty vacation rentals. It doesn't matter that there's a lot of Airbnb inventory. the problem is, like you said, we have a housing shortage from an affordability standard. And, so there really isn't.
And address one of the points you made there. The population is not growing at the moment. I mean, we're not producing as many babies, and we don't have as much immigration coming to the country. Where some is coming across the southern border, but the big influxes of people that you used to see at the beginning of the last century were coming from Europe. Europe is in fine shape, and they don't need to come to the U.S. anymore. So you don't see the big influx of people coming here. I mean, every once in a while, like Ukraine's having a war, we said, okay, we'll take so many refugees. Syria, they had a war and civil war still going on over there. We'd allowed so many people to come in, but not enough that it's really impacting our population that much. However, what we have seen, and this is what I think is causing even in spite of not seeing population growth, we are seeing household development or household formation, as they call it, because many people that are under 45, which is the majority of people buying new homes now, or not new homes, I should say, buying homes, creating new households. They held off, whatever the reasons were. Of course, the pandemic held people off for a while. They were scared by what was happening with that. Many people were straddled by college debt. So that's where the growth for households is coming from. And so even though, at least for now, even though there's not population growth, there is household growth.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's take a couple questions, Melissa.
I'd like to do that.
We have so far. And
Yep.
we want to know, guys, what's going on in your area. And I know we have been inundated, and I know a lot of you are waiting still on responses on what's going on in your area. You've sent in emails. Literally, I am overwhelmed by the amount of information, or how many people want to know what's going on in their town. And, just be patient. I think I'll be completely caught up to today or tonight's show within the next couple of days. So if you haven't gotten what's going on in your town, you're not forgotten. I should have everybody caught up in the next couple of days. But a lot of you want to know, what's going on in your city. What are we seeing? What are the stats? Are prices going up or prices going down? Because they are different all across the market, all across the U.S. The areas where you have a huge amount of new construction, we are seeing the biggest price reductions in new housing, where there is a glut, where neighborhoods are sitting, hundreds of houses or lots that are ready to be built on. A lot of these builders are just building new houses, and they're in construction with no buyers, and they call them quick delivery or fast delivery inventory, which means that you can run in, buy it, make your deal, pick your final finishings, and we are seeing a lot of these builders, they're just continuing to build full speed ahead. But regarding the builders, an interesting thing that I saw, and this is in Maryland, it's in Cecil County, so only Marylanders will know where that is, and half of them don't know where it is. But there's a builder that was up there. What they did is they said, we've got a standard package. It is affordable to your typical middle income person, family. But we're not where you maybe could go in and say, hey, I want these kind of cabinets and these kind of countertops versus what you're offering for your base model, or I want to bring in a better refrigerator model. That took away from their concept. Their concept was based on economies of scale. So they said, we've purchased refrigerators and ovens and washers and dryers that are all the same. They're a basic good model, but we were able to we got a development of 200 homes. We could go to that supplier and say, we're buying 200 of these. We want good pricing on it, instead of, 25% of them are this model and another 25% are some other model. And the same thing with the cabinets, the countertops. It was a nice, well-built home, but you didn't necessarily have all these
upgrades to it. That way they could keep a good cost. And it was kind of, you take it or leave it. If you want to if you want to add to it, go at it. You want to put wood floors in, go ahead. But we are, just as an example, we're putting in, carpet or whatever. So that was one bill. And that was really just before the pandemic got really fully underway. Maybe they were anticipating the way the market was going to collapse and said, we've got to find a way to control this cost. And for the most part, they were able to keep their prices. Will that model still work? Well, I don't know. I haven't been up there lately.
We do have some questions on new builds that I would like to address here. We had Brad. Thank you for your question. I just bought in a single family development of new builds. It's 75% done, only 25% occupied though. I've heard some builders are going to rent them out.
Yeah, there were quite a few builders back in the 2008 crisis that turned their whole communities into rental communities. I know locally here, we had a home builder that did just that, and they just couldn't sell the houses. And I also know this particular builder, the houses that they did sell, they were basically just selling the house for free to offload the lot and to profit on the lot because they were developers too. So, will we see this? We're already seeing where investors are going in and buying bundles of houses from builders nationwide for the purposes of rentals. Yes. So I think that we'll see more of this.
Yeah, another question here, dealing with the new construction. It says right here, Ricky L., do you think it would have helped prices if small builders would have stopped building while lumber was so high?
Small builders would have stopped building. A lot of builders, especially the small builders, right, were they're under contract. So, they were hopeful. They were trying to forge ahead. I think that, no one had a crystal ball. Lumber price did shoot up from $400 on average per board foot to $1,200 per board foot. So, lumber went up, 300% in a matter of weeks and months. It has come down considerably, but, do I think it would have helped the prices? I think the only thing it hurt was their profit margins, if anything. I don't think that the houses that they were under contract with, prior to the skyrocketing lumber prices would have made much of a difference.
And some of this had just as much to do with the suppliers of the lumber. There's, you can go all the way back to the tree, but in all the markets, there's going to be the local supplier of that lumber. And in some cases, I know this happened with one of the suppliers in the Baltimore, greater Baltimore market. They anticipated prices going up, and they went and found as much lumber as they could and stocked up. So at least for a while, if builders went to them for their lumber, they weren't seeing the increased prices. But at some point in time, that inventory was going to run out. And I think even if they had stopped building when prices were extremely high, prices are still high. Just an anecdotal thing. I know someone putting a deck on their house. It's maybe a 12 by 12 area. They asked about making it a 4-season room and and this is without a basement, basically just a foundation to support a deck. And they were told like $100,000 for that small of a room. Now it does have a roof and outside walls and everything, but it was, if you look prior to the 2008 recession, you could probably put up a 2,000 square foot home for cost wise, $125,000. And, for a room, basically it's $100,000. At least that's the particular contractor's quote that they got. Maybe they should have shopped around.
We've got a current day comment here talking about what's happening right now. We've got Andrea Martin. Lumber prices have dropped by 72% year over year. What impact will this have on new home prices now?
I think new home prices are coming down regardless of what lumber prices do. I think, based on the affordability issue, the lot costs are so much money. A lot of people don't realize this, but builders, just to stick a shovel in the ground, a lot of times they're working on the engineering side of things for up to a decade before they get their approval, depending on how big the project is, whether it's a, planned community, master association, which we've seen a lot of across the country. But when you're talking about major subdivisions where there are hundreds of homes, this is easily a 5 or 6 year money spending spree prior to being able to break ground. Then they have to put the infrastructure in, all your stormwater management controls. They have to post bonds. They have to put roadways in, grading, moving the earth, around. So by the time they do all this, they're in millions and millions of dollars. So I think that, this affordability issue that has been happening, there's a lot of, they've been building, like Ron had just earlier mentioned, they're building houses for wealthy people. And so a lot of these new communities, that's who they're building for. And, so when you're getting into houses that are in the $700,000, $800,000, $900,000 range, we're not talking about the bulk of the new houses that are in the $200,000 and $300 range. We're talking about the bulk of these new houses, very expensive. So I think just based on that, we're going to see massive price reductions. The ones that are holding the bag right now are the builders. This is not, in my opinion, this is not something that's going away anytime soon. This affordability crisis that we're experiencing, this is a mess. This is going to play out over the next several of years. And I think we're going to see a lot of downturn and a lot of, volatility. We're going to see a lot of probably bankruptcies within some of these companies. I think we're far, far, far from being out of the woods on this.
We have Travis Mindset here with the super chat.
Go ahead, Melissa. Super cash or super chat?
I don't know why I struggle with this weekly, but I do. I have such a hard time with it. And he was right here, and I flagged him. And
Travis,
there we go.
Love you, man.
Travis,
thank you so much.
you.
Real estate mindset. Travis
Yeah.
is amazing. He's a big supporter of our channel, and so are we of his.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for joining in. Let's talk about his question here.
Yeah.
Vacancy rate on commercial property.
Yep. Any worries about the vacancy rate for commercial property? Thank you all for all that you do. Thank you.
Yeah. So, commercial real estate, I think we were just talking about this in our sales meeting with a lot of these big companies. Goldman Sachs is in the news big time about some of the, financial trouble that they're having on a global level as far as their real estate investments. But I think that, we've seen some dominoes start to fall on the commercial real estate side. Big developer in California, almost to the tune of $1 billion in default, $700-800 million. We know that there are New Jersey mall owners that are hundreds of millions of dollars in default of paying their bills. We have been seeing office vacancy rates escalate in a lot of the markets across the U.S. because people are working from home. We now know that a lot of these building owners are going to have big problems refinancing these properties as their commercial loans, their cheap money loans are coming up for renewal to where they have, 4% commercial loans that are now going to be probably close to double. Their payments are going to shoot up. Insurance costs are up. Utility costs are up. Insurance, like I said, everything is up. So I do think we're going to see some major problems in the commercial space. As far as, what seems to be holding on amazingly, so is, I mean, I don't know how some of these restaurants are staying in business, but the restaurant, owners seem to be doing okay, depending on where they're located. But over the last couple of weeks, that has even dropped off. There's been a lot of decline because people aren't spending money as much. But I think that commercial is going to take a hit, and the impact Ron kind of alluded to. You have an employer, 10,000 jobs lost, or we start seeing these high dollar salaries being eliminated. They're going to be shopping less, and we're going to see businesses go out of business. It sounds terrible, but I think it's true.
And that's something. Unemployment numbers right now are low, and even with a recession, people aren't predicting that they're going to go very high, but they're not talking as much. Well, some people are, about even though they're employed, the wages are not growing. And for many people, those wages are coming down. So that's only going to, when we talk about housing supply and affordability, it's only going to make the problem worse. Like the report that Fannie Mae did, and there are some more recent reports, that was done in the end of last year. I don't think the situation has changed that much, except perhaps for the worse, because wages are not going up. Not that people are lowering how much they make. It's just that in any given job, it's just they're not in those jobs anymore. So, you leave the job at Google. Where are you now? You're a consultant making websites for people.
Yeah. And that's the big thing. So, and that's not new. That's not new. So, we've been talking about this for a while. So prior to the pandemic, and I know for some of you that have listened to our show in the past, we've spoke about this. Prior to the pandemic, businesses were cutting back. They were using automation. Saw an article about I think it was in Texas, about a McDonald's that is people-less, 0 employees in this McDonald's.
Might as well. They got rid of the food.
It's 100% automated. They got rid of the food. What we're looking at is businesses have been cutting back. It was predicted back in like 2017, and I spoke at this conference before. A lot of this was predicted where, I went to this conference, Internet of Things, where companies were cutting back their office space. They were laying people off, using more outside resource, different contractors to be able to interview, get the best of a specific, need for their business. And they wanted independent contractors so that they could compete. And let's face it, guys, the employers they don't want to be paying expensive benefits for employees. I mean, this is no surprise. This shouldn't be a shock. Health insurance is very expensive.
If you remember the last, not the presidential election when Andrew Yang was in it, not to support him or not support him, but he basically said about 40% of the jobs that are out there could today be replaced with automation. And now, especially, it was accelerated when the pandemic took place. You're seeing what he basically was telling us several years ago.
Big money is going to win. They're going to win. I mean, let's face it. I mean, these big employers, these big businesses, they're going to make money, and they're going to do it at whatever cost. And, I think that we can't be ignorant to that. And so when we're looking at businesses that are struggling every single day, it's because of their cost of operation. And, so there's no surprise that prices are as expensive as they are. And that's how I don't know how they're going to come down. You can't keep cost high on the businesses and then expect that the prices are going to drop. And that's what stagflation is. We have a drop off in demand and high pricing, or, high inflation. And I think this is the big issue that the Fed's going to have to deal with. So when the Fed's addressing Congress saying, we're going to raise rates, we're going to keep the pressure on, we're not pivoting off at 2%. We're not going to be satisfied with 3%. I think what it's fair for us to say that this is going to be a long-term event, not something that's going to happen
And
this
it's
year.
not just the Fed though, and limiting the money supply that's in the economy. Some things have to be answered, such as the cost of fuel, which impacts just about everything out there, because so many things are goods, physical goods are transported. You got a high cost of transportation because the energy cost is high, or the energy cost for people just to drive their own cars is still high. So somehow that has to be addressed. It'd be nice if they stop having a war over in Russia and Ukraine, but however, that should be stopped. The one of the things that, of course, caused some of the inflation was the pandemic, and we're really past the pandemic, and supplies are coming back. You would hope that was not the issue anymore. Some people are still using it. And one thing, and I don't know how you address it, I think that because this is considered an issue and it's in the news all the time, corporations take advantage of that and say, you think there's inflation? Fine, we'll give you inflation. So call it corporate greed, if you will. I think that part of what's happening with inflation is related to corporations just raising prices. When I look at the price of food, every time I go to the supermarket, it's a little bit higher. And I say, well, wait a minute. The price of fuel has, even though it's higher than I'd like it to be, it has stabilized. During the pandemic, food companies stayed open. It was considered an essential business. So they weren't really hurt by supplies being limited because of the pandemic. So, and even if they were, hasn't it stabilized? Why are you raising the price every time I go? To me, there's a corporate greed involved in there also. I don't know how you resolve that one, but that's to me, that's part of it.
As I said, I mean, money is going to continue to make money. I mean, there's no question about it.
There was something
Let's
to
take
be
some questions.
said, though. I just want to say really quickly, because Brenda made a very good statement here. I'm hoping that the desire for human interaction will trump automation at places like McDonald's. And yes, no doubt this will be a long-term event. I also read today, came up on my feed, that Barnes & Noble is expanding and actually having more stores be put in throughout the country, which I think, as much as automation, we know it's happening, the human experience desires to have that interaction, touching a book, going into a store. So we'll have to see how that plays out. But
you can say that in our industry too. Mm-hmm. Some people used to say, well, now that you got the internet and all this information out there, what are you going to do? People used to look at us as the keeper of the key. We don't have to give you the key to open the house anymore. What do we need you for? Well, there's a ton of stuff you need us for that you needed us for in the past, but we really had to make it understood. These are the services we provide. This is why you have a real estate agent. That people didn't quite understand all of those things in the past. So we've used technology to help us. Mm-hmm. Well, especially with Sachs Realty, staying ahead of the curve. If you look at a Sachs Realty listing, what are you going to see? You're going to see 3D tours, aerial photos. You're better than or even a video with Todd does his own videos on the show, as we were talking about in the meeting today, where you're there giving a better display of that house, better selling that house. The technology is there for it now, and you just got to use it. And then, of course, there are some people who still go out with a flip phone and take the photos with those, and it looks like it.
Well, let's segue right into, since we're talking about real estate agents and the transaction, realtors here. What do you tell a buyer considering buying right now? Don't BS me.
Yeah, I tell a buyer that they should have 6 months of cash after every expense in buying the house, or they should wait. I think that, too many people are buying houses with no money in their bank account. And, and there's certainly plenty of ways to get in the house with no money, but that's okay if you have money. But if you're, getting the seller to pay your closing costs and you're getting grants, things like this, towards your down payment, or, you're buying as a VA borrower with no money down and you don't have money in your bank account, that's a problem because things are going to break with the house. And I think that the other thing is that you have to explain to people that they may be buying at the top, and, and they have to be aware of that. If they're not watching the news and they're not paying attention to Sachs Realty's podcast, where I've been, continually, sounding the alarm since back in April of a year ago, that we were headed into a changing market and that, prices were out of control and buyers were doing, crazy things to win a house that they're completely buried in. These are what we tell these buyers, especially first-time buyers. I'm not talking about repeat buyers. I look at a repeat buyer. If you bought a house before and you're selling a house and you're making a ton of money on it, hey, what you're doing. You've owned a house before. But when we're talking about, a buyer, more specifically, I'm saying this is what we're telling first-time buyers. There's no secret out there, right? But I want to tell you guys something. For the first time this past weekend, I was calling to make appointments and inquire for a client about houses, 5 different houses that hit the market that my client was interested in. And out of those 5 houses, and we're talking about in the $350,000 to $400,000 price range, in the 5 calls that I made, 2 of the sellers were short sales, which means that they are already advertising their price for less than what they owe, so that, the bank has to approve taking less money to sell the house. And a third, this is 5 calls, 2 of them short sales, and a third, the agent told me they had dropped the price to $400,000. It was in the 5s. They had just dropped the price over the last 170 days or whatever, down to $400,000. And I said to the agent, "What's going on with the house? What's happening? Why isn't it selling? I mean, something must be going on here." And, he said, "Well, the house is vacant. It shows well, it's dated. There's evidence of a roof leak. I think it was fixed. The siding's rotting. The trim is rotting. So there is work that needs to be done. But I have to tell you, we turned down another offer. And if your buyer likes the house and is planning on offering less than what it's listed at right now, it will be a short sale." And I'm blown away by this, right? Not really. I shouldn't be surprised. I shouldn't be blown away by it. But this is 5 calls, 3 of the 5 calls, 2 short sales, 1 potential short sale. This is something that we haven't heard. Short sales, selling a house for less than what it's owed. This is just happening, guys. There are more vacant houses in my travels now going around. I can see it. I can point and say, "That's a vacant house. That's a vacant house. That's a vacant house." And you can tell they're vacant. And guess what? We're going to really tell when they're vacant when the grass starts growing in our area, because right now it's cold outside. So give it another month, give it mid-April. We're going to see who's in trouble, because their grass is going to be 2 feet tall. And we're going to be able to pinpoint and drop it and say, "Guys, I'm telling you right now, we have a lot of struggling people out there." You can say anything you want, say it's not happening in your area. I'm telling you, we are seeing it. We're hearing it. If anybody has to sell that bought in the last 2 years, this isn't a good scenario.
Well, another thing, when somebody's looking to buy now, I think they're focusing on price. Is this the right time to come in at a lowball offer? That kind of thing. Some lenders are combating this current housing situation in a different way. I think it's a ridiculous way. I saw a lender the other day advertise for a VA loan they could go up to a 68% ratio. I mean, it used to be the back end ratio when you included mortgage
Explain that, Ron.
and debt was 41%. So they were saying we can take the mortgage plus whatever debt you have, like if you have a car loan or whatever additional debt, that can go up to 68% of your monthly income. That's basically all of your money because they base that on gross. The rest of your money's taxes, almost. So how can they do something like that? The mortgage is the mortgage. That doesn't include everything else you have to pay in life. Like you got to pay for your car, you got to pay for food, you got to pay for clothes, got to pay for medicine, medical insurance, and they're going up to 68%. Like, who are you trying to kid? So don't be taken in by some of these people. Or I have a buyer I'm working with now, and one of the lenders, she told her, I'd like to have a payment around this much. And the lender decided where she thought home prices were. She didn't talk with me. Based on that, she said, well, I can give you a 3-1 buy down. Well, that's a temporary buy down of what our loan's going to be. In a couple of years, you're going to be higher than you want to be. You'll be where you want to be today, but not tomorrow, not next year, and not the next year. You'll be much higher. And talk about people who might foreclose or go into short sale. She's setting that person up for that, especially if prices don't go up or continue to come down, which I don't think anybody's predicting that, at least in the short term. And I say short term, I say 1-2 years, prices aren't going to be going up anywhere drastically. Eventually, because just over time, real estate prices do go up. We'll eventually see, after the market adjusts now, we'll see prices continue to go up. Just, I assume. Never know what might happen.
I tell you, and Ron, and I have to say, look, I have always said that since World War II, we have seen the great appreciation of home values. This is something, when we're looking at the 2008 crisis, when this all started to tremble, right? We started seeing where, man, people are really in debt. I mean, this cheap money really got out of hand. When we could get 2.74% mortgage rates, of course, what is the result of that? Well, the prices can be higher. We can buy a bigger house. We can afford more. What people don't realize a lot of times until it's too late is they don't realize that moving from that apartment into the house is 3 times bigger, so are their utility bills. So are their property taxes now going up. So people didn't realize that there were other costs associated with buying a house. Number one. Number two, they didn't anticipate a recession or some type of economic trouble, right? Financial hardship. And people were staying 7 to 9 years in a house on average. I mean, you're not going to be able to sell your house in 7 to 9 years to get out of it what you paid for the house. And the question is going to be, is it an investment? And I've heard some speakers that really were torn up by real estate agents because, and they said a house is not an investment. I'm not saying that a house is not an investment, but I'm telling you that making bad decisions on a house, there are many people, of the almost 4 million people that were foreclosed on in 2008, will argue that a house was an investment. That paying too much for a house was an investment. Being enticed to overspend was an investment, especially when the repairs started happening to the house that they couldn't afford. It is a depreciating asset. If you don't continue to spend money on your house, it depreciates rapidly. And when the next round of buyers come in that house and you don't have the money to fix it, and you need $150,000 in repairs before somebody will buy it, you might not believe it's an investment either. The other thing I want to point out here, because this was a great conversation, was that people don't realize that they're paying 3 times the amount for their home over the course of 30 years. So when you look at the principal interest payment of your home, the amount of money that you're paying in interest and the little bit of money that you're paying in principal, because let's think about something. they lock you in at a mortgage rate of principal and interest of $3,500. That's what you're buying as a payment. The first year, they're going to cram as much of that in interest as they possibly can, because you're paying 7%, 7.65% now interest on your principal balance, $400,000. Divide that by 12. So the bulk of your payment is an interest payment. So for years and years and years, you're not even taking a dent out of the price that you're paying on the house. You're paying the bank. You're making the banks wealthy buying your home. So
the things that you also have to look at, though, and that is absolutely true. If somebody bought a house for $100,000 a few years ago, 30 years later, maybe it's worth $300,000. So, oh, look how much it appreciated. But if they got a mortgage and if the 30 years went by, they paid $300,000. However, as you said, there's all that interest. That was a tax deduction. So if their mortgage payment were the same as a rental payment, they can do better with the mortgage payment because they've got the tax deduction. And then when the 30 years is up or somewhere along the line, when they say, okay, now I want to retire, and they want to go to a retirement community, they've got that house that has $300,000 worth of equity in it. Whereas if you were renting, you don't have that. And so when somebody's making a decision, do I rent or do I buy? It's not just the immediate, what is the monthly rental amount versus what is the mortgage amount? You got to consider all those other factors. But one of the things that I think has been good, and this has held some people back from buying, is we've become somewhat more of a mobile society. And some people say, I don't want to buy because I don't want to be strapped down. And this was somewhat either talked about or alluded to in some of your previous shows, is the use of the Airbnb, let's say. I have somebody right now, they split time between Baltimore and Chicago. They're looking to buy a house in Baltimore, but they want to make sure that they'll be able to use it as a rental or as an Airbnb, so that when they're in Chicago, they can say, I want to rent that house back here. What that does is that allows somebody to buy a house, start creating that equity, and still be able to be mobile. Because when they're paying rent for the Airbnb in Chicago, they're renting the place that's in Baltimore and getting the rent back. So it kind of breaks even on the rental end. And as long as they have enough income that's paying the mortgage, they're still gaining equity in that house. And I think some people, especially younger people, are starting to recognize that as an option. Whereas before it was, now I'm just going to rent because I don't know if I'm going to stay in whatever town I'm in. And I know what happens in Baltimore. A lot of young people like Baltimore. And there are some pretty cool areas in Baltimore, and they will move here. They like the lifestyle, but they say, I don't know if my job's going to stay here. So they don't buy. Instead, they rent. But if they knew that kind of an option was there, hey, you can buy and you still can keep that same option of mobility open. I think more people will start considering purchasing. When we talk about creating more housing supply, if people consider those kinds of options, it helps. It doesn't necessarily help affordability, but it does help with getting more people out there. So that's just a thought.
More questions?
Yeah, so many good things with exactly what you guys are saying. First, talking about that 2-1 buy down. Brenda, good point, Ron. And a buy down costs thousands more out of pocket cash to close. Then what does the homeowner do when 2 years from now the mortgage payment is 25% more a month? Very slippery slope. And you need to be educated on looking at the potential of what that monthly payment is going to be.
Yeah. Actually, especially if you were going to be in the house for the long term, if you buy the interest rate down, say it's 6.5%, and you buy it down to 6.25% for the length of the loan, if you look at the numbers, you'll find out that you save considerably more money by lowering the interest rate for the length of the loan rather than for that temporary period of time.
Mm-hmm.
It's money much better spent if you do it that way.
And then we had really quickly here. Yep, Renee, we had, how do you see the Airbnb market this year?
I think, there are a lot of Airbnb out there. If as long as traveling stays, relatively strong, travel stays strong, I think Airbnb is a fantastic, alternative to staying in a hotel. The benefit, as we know, with Airbnb, is that more people can stay together. So I think when people can save money by putting 6 and 8 people or more in a house for a period of time, I think that it makes sense. I think that a lot of people that started Airbnb business underestimated the amount of work that it is. It's a job. So I think that we'll see a lot of Airbnb hit the market simply because of that. People bought during the pandemic. They thought it would be a great idea. They would buy a house that they could utilize and, and then rent it out, that vacation rental. But again, I mean, these short-term stays, you need to clean the entire place. You have to keep it up, and you're going to be paying a management, fee if you live far away from it, and it's going to be hard to stay on top. So I think that Airbnb market overall is a strong market. I think it is definitely becoming more popular. It's kind of like one of those things where not a whole lot of people yet know about it. It's amazing how many people that have never used Airbnb while traveling. So I think that it has yet to scratch the surface as far as market share. But I do think that there will be less operators and, more, houses go on the market because they underestimated the workload.
I saw a house very recently that's on the market. It was just renovated. It's a 3-unit, and the third unit, it's 3 stories plus a basement. The third story, they purposely made it such that it would be an Airbnb. In other words, it's a vacant house except for the third unit. They furnished it with the idea that you'll rent this one as an Airbnb. You don't have to do that, but that was their thinking, is that's what people are doing. And if you weren't thinking that, here's a good idea. And here's the kind of rents that we estimate you could get, how much money you could make doing the Airbnb versus getting a permanent renter in there. At least in their estimation, they actually thought that the Airbnb would bring them more money, because a short-term rental is going to give you more money than a long-term rental, as long as you can keep people in there.
But it's a job. I mean, you're cleaning it. I mean, It's expensive. You're cleaning the house top to bottom. It'll kill you in reviews.
Yeah, and if you don't live in the area, you're going to have to hire these people, and you got to make sure you got reputable people who will go in and do a sufficient job.
Yeah, and the challenges with Airbnb, we've yet to see the full effect of that. So the hotel industry is fighting it left and right. I would imagine they're behind a lot of lobbying. We're talking about big corporations, big money. And, there's a lot going on right now where they're trying to eliminate Airbnb, I'm not just talking about from an HOA standpoint, to where, the homeowners association says, okay, I have a $750,000 community I live next to. Some of these areas where these new communities, you could touch the house, and I have a party house there all weekend long, every single weekend. And we need to eliminate these. So there's the pressure from the HOA, but I'm talking about the real pressure where the government is stepping in, and a lot of municipalities, counties, townships, and they're saying that they're changing their laws, their short-term rental laws, that say if you're going to operate a short-term rental, you must live there. It has to be your primary residence. So you could have an accessory dwelling unit, or you can have a couple rooms inside your house. And that's really what founded Airbnb. It was, to rent out rooms to people that were coming in and, kind of make some money, house hack, a form of house hacking. But I think,
I wonder if we shouldn't talk with our legislators and say, you're behind what the market is doing. The laws you're trying to pass. Like I mentioned, there are people who like the idea of mobility. So they are going to have short-term rentals, and they're not necessarily going to be living at that house. But now suddenly the government says, oh, well, you got to live in that house. Well, you just ruined my plans and the plans of lots of other people if you go and do something like that. I mean, I'm not saying legislatures aren't doing that. I'm just questioning whether or not they should.
I don't think they care about that, but that's, we'll leave the politics out of the show. But I don't think,
absolutely.
I don't think they care. I don't think they care about your poor old landlord,
The thing is, and it's not up to you and me to do the lobbying, but that's where, like our local associations or the National Association of Realtors should step in and say, look, this is what the real estate market is doing nowadays. Get on board with it. Don't pass outdated laws.
Yep.
We got
COSO just said, I don't want Airbnbs in my neighborhood. And I get it. I don't disagree.
Well, I understand. But at the same time, taxi cab companies didn't like it when Uber came about, but Uber's staying strong.
But they're not, Uber's not disrupting me as a owner of a neighborhood either, right? So what they need is just like a good dog owner, just like a good parent. So we need a good Airbnb host that prevents parties from happening in their house. So, you have to look at the operators here, right? We all know the people that are the neighbors that let their dogs out in the neighborhood. I mean, I was just at an open house and the dogs next door were just barking the whole time. They're barking 2 hours. The dog's barking. You would think they would lose their bark by that time, right? But no, just barking. You have to stop and think. Like,
toss them a bone.
Are the people home, right? I mean, like, do they care that their dog is barking through the neighborhood? So you have bad dog owners, right? Like, hey, take care of your dog. I don't want to hear it when I go outside in my backyard. I don't want to listen to your dog freaking trying to climb over the fence, continuously for 4 hours straight while I'm trying to have a nice peaceful time in my backyard. So I think it is what happens is you get these bad operators and everybody else is penalized because of it. We can't say, oh, you got to do this or you have to adhere to these laws. They just say, we don't want them. It's not going to happen. And as a result, it's kind of like, that's what we get.
Got another super cash, forget it. I don't even know what it is. The Duke, thank you.
Dude, thanks so much. Man.
$5. Thank you so much. And then he has a question. Any words of wisdom for those of us on the sidelines waiting for reasonable prices, but so tired?
Yeah, it comes down to affordability. And Ron, if you want to add to that, I mean, it's if you can afford to buy, I think that we will start seeing more price reductions as this plays out. I think there's going to be a rude awakening come March, mid to end of March. I think that what's going to happen is the Fed's going to raise this Fed rate, the overnight rate, another 0.5 point. No, that does not ride hand in hand necessarily with mortgage rates. That's more on the Treasury yield that is determining, you have mortgage-backed securities or you have the Treasury, right? More specifically, the 10-year Treasury. So you have an investor that has money to invest and they look at the economy and they go, ugh, do I want to invest in mortgage-backed securities or do I want to invest in a 10-year Treasury where I can't lose and I'm going to not lose my money? It's not going to be risky. So they're competing for each other, right? I'm not a financial advisor, but this is what is happening, right? So as affordability in the country, economic instability starts to take hold, people are like, the only way I want to invest in a mortgage is if I'm really making out way better than I would if I just took this guaranteed money, right? So because I might lose my money if America goes broke over their mortgage payment, right? But what the Fed raising this rate is going to do is it is going to impact anyone that has revolving debt. You have $10,000 on your credit card. This is going to really affect you, right? It has over the last year. People aren't able to buy down their debt. Their affordability is disappearing. The bank accounts are being drained. So as a result, I call mortgage rates whatever you want to call them. People couldn't afford them. People can't afford home prices at 5%. Okay. The reason why so many people bought, you had a third of the people buying houses were first-time buyers that were getting checks, gift money from mom and dad. Right? Huge percentage of them, like 40% of the buyers of the 30-some percent, 33, 34% of first-time buyers were getting a lift off from mom and dad, or they wouldn't have been able to afford the house, to get in the house, afford the down payment requirements. Another third of the buyers were investors, right? So these companies, whether it's Wall Street type companies, institutional buyers, insurance companies, REITs, whatever, these buyers, these investor buyers, these guys are pooling cash together, right? I mean, a lot of these companies are traded. So what happens is, when we start looking at who was buying the houses and who's left over or what's left over, you start taking affordability out. I don't care whether mortgage rates are 7% or 8.5%. It doesn't matter. Start crushing consumers with high interest rates, wipe out their bank accounts as a result of their debt. Now, these are decisions that they made. This is debt they were responsible for. These are car payments that they financed for 7 years. But you start compounding this issue. Now we have a housing affordability crisis. People can't afford to buy them. What's going to happen? Prices are going to have to come down for the people that must sell. Now, right now, I know
one of the things people did before we had the crash in 2008, and whether they purposely did this or not, well, that's questionable. They had equity in their house. Value was going up. They refinanced. When they refinanced it, they said, okay, now I refinanced it because I wanted the money for a reason. It may have been I wanted to get a new car. It might have been I had to have money to send my child to college. So they did
deck on the house.
Well, and if you put the stuff that they did to the house aside, they did it to things other than the house. Maybe it was vacation, maybe it's a new car, maybe it's college tuition, or maybe it was a second house. The market crashes, and all of a sudden they say, "Oh, now I'm going to short sale." The thing is, they came out ahead because everything else they put their money into was not the house. I still got the college education. I still got the new car. I short sailed, so now I'm not paying it. And if we actually had the same kind of crash now, and we knew that was going to happen, people could say, well, gee, maybe I ought to refinance now, take all the money out, spend it on other things, let the market crash, I'll short sale.
Right. So you think that had any stimulus in the economy, Ron? I mean, we had, refinancing at 4%. And I want you guys to understand, 2.75% was not the refinance rate. Okay. You have new purchase rates and you have refinance rates. The refinance rates are still amazing. And the appreciation was happening on the houses. So just like Ron said, they could take that extra cash. Hey, I tell you what, your house is worth a lot more money than it was when you bought it 5 years ago or 7 years ago. Why don't you take this extra equity while the money's cheap? So let's take Ron's 100% right. So let's take the equity. Let's spend it. Let's spend that money, right? Now we're more in debt in our house. You've just taken the house that you had equity in and you wiped the equity out. So a lot of people, Ron, and this is good. I like that you brought that up because, and by the way, Ron is amazing. Ron is, if you guys are looking to buy and you're in Maryland, I tell you what, you want to talk, there is no one that cares more about buyers and sellers and doing his job than Ron Trzcinski. So hats off to you, Ron. We appreciate you being on here. We love having you at Sachs. But I'm glad he brought this up because people are saying, well, everybody will be fine because they have nothing but equity in their house. So it could never be like the financial crisis of 2008. because it's different now. We don't have liar loans. We don't have no doc loans. We don't have this and that and everything else. And it's different now. We have more debt, ladies and gentlemen, than we've ever had. Right. And now we're going to pay for it.
I want to get back to the question that led us on in all different directions here.
That's what happens here.
Well, over the long haul, we've talked about how prices of houses do go up. And in general, they go up at about the same at any given time. They might be different, but if you do a correlation, a regression analysis between home prices and inflation, they're about the same. And I know the Fed's trying to go down to 2%, but let's say inflation is anywhere between 3 and 5% over the long haul. So if you look at houses now and you say, oh, well, they're overpriced. Well, how low should you go? I mean, if a house is at 500 and you say, well, I'm going to offer them 250, well, you're probably nuts. Unless maybe the person at 500 is nuts. Sometimes people will say, I don't want to embarrass them. Sometimes I look at a price for a house and I said, they're insulting us by putting a house on the market at such a ridiculous overpriced value that, wasting our time for something that's way out of whack. Nonetheless, what I was going to get to is, let's say it's 500,000 and you say, let's say houses were at the right price at relative to that curve of 3 to 5%. Then 2018, let's say the house was where it should have been. And then over the last few years, they've been going up at like 20%, which is ridiculous. Obviously, it shouldn't go that much. It would adjust. So how much do you adjust it? Do you adjust it back down to, if you say 2018 was right, do you say, well, let me go a couple of years, 2 or 3 years here at 5% and see where would it be and see what that price is? Because you have to figure out what the price should have been in 2018 and then add those percentages for the few years that we've taken here. That might give you an idea as to what a reasonable price would be, and it takes out all the spikes in the appreciation that we've seen lately.
And Duke, the issue will be at that. And Ron is, he's speaking the truth there. I mean, 4% on average has been if you look, and again, there have been periods of time where we have seen spikes in home values go up. But usually it goes with wage growth too. And over the last decade, we've seen very little wage growth. And I looked at something the other day where it said, in the last year, we've had 4% on average wage growth. I don't know, guys, where they come up with these numbers, but I can tell you that even if it were 4% wage growth, over the last year, then inflation was 12%. I mean, I don't know what the true number was.
Yeah, with the wages, when you put that in there, they call it the wage price spiral. Wages go up, prices go up.
Right. Yep.
So when there had for so long been a push to increase the minimum wage to $15, and some companies voluntarily have done that. What that should mean, if the wage structure in any given company is still equitable, is everybody else's wage in that company should go up also. So somebody who was at 15, now if you make the minimum 15, maybe they had to go up to 20 or whatever. So everybody in that company is going up. And of course, that's going to have to raise the price of the product. And you were talking about interest rates. And of course, interest rates, at one time they were 16%. And actually where they are right now is right around where they are for the average over the last 20 or 30 years, which means absolutely nothing. What you really look at is affordability. What are people's incomes versus what are the price of homes? And then the interest rate either falls in line or it doesn't fall in line with you being able to afford that house. But there's something I was going to talk about today. Just a quick point. FHA is important because some people aren't aware. And this is a part of your mortgage payment is going to include mortgage and interest. You talked in a previous show about risk and reward when somebody's looking at a at a mortgage. When a lender's looking at the mortgage, it's a risk to lend, but they want a reward. They want to minimize the risk. One of the ways of minimizing the risk is mortgage insurance premiums. And FHA has substantially reduced that mortgage insurance premium just a couple of weeks ago. So let's say on a $400,000 house, the savings per year, and this is irrelevant what the interest rate is, the savings would be almost $1,200 per year on a $400,000 with the now lower mortgage insurance premium. So, of course, as soon as they did that, I don't know if it's coincidental or not, interest rates did go up. So the savings you might have gotten from that were lost in a higher interest rate. Nonetheless, mortgage payments are lower. And one thing it says is if that came down, is the mortgage industry saying that these mortgages are not as high a risk as they were before, now that we can lower the insurance? I don't know. I'm not sure what it says, but I do know that it is lower. And buyers should recognize that. If they were worried, oh, interest rates are too high, here is one place where numbers are coming down. So it's worth knowing if you are looking to buy. And VA has a similar fee. They do it a little differently because VA has a guaranteed loan versus FHA, it's an insured loan. But the number that they use for VA has also been reduced. I don't have the numbers, how much you save on those in front of me, but you're also going to save if you do a VA loan. So it's worth knowing.
Well, I think I don't know that they think that mortgages are less risky, but who knows what's really going on. But you think FHA had any idea that interest rates are going to go up?
Well, if FHA doesn't have economists on staff who know what figures to look at regarding mortgage rates, then nobody does. So I would say they know it as well as anybody. Did they know what was going to happen? Probably not.
Let's take a few more questions before we call it a night.
Yep. We've got another super cash for thanks. Pray for us in the Tampa St. Pete Clearwater area. Still quite nuts. Thank you, Doms, for the super cash. Got Travis again. One more super cash for a great chat. Are the buyer's remorse surveys a good indicator of why buyers should beware?
I think 100%, Travis. We are seeing more buyer remorse than ever before. I talk to people, it seems weekly, if not daily, that are, concerned about, what should they do about this or that, or, they wish they would have had the home inspection, that they hadn't waived their rights. Things are expensive. They overpaid for a house.
Yeah, it's a combination of things. They overpaid. There's remorse there. They didn't get an inspection, and now they're finding things wrong. There's remorse there. And in many cases, not only did they overpay, in order to beat the appraisal, so to speak, if the appraisal was $400 and they paid $425, they came up with $25,000 in cash. So they depleted a lot of their funds. They didn't even have the money available to take care of those maintenance items.
I think a lot of the proof to this is that, I know here locally, and speaking with my real estate attorney, there are a lot of complaints at the Real Estate Commission against buyers agents. And I know that, even with people that have had inspections, because they overpaid with the price of the home, and now they're realizing that even though they had an inspection, they didn't hire a good inspector, and there are things that are wrong that weren't picked up. And, they've gone back and looked at their contracts with the home inspection company to basically find out that they're screwed, that there's no recourse, there's nothing they can do because of the fine print in the home inspection. So, I think, yes, there is a lot of remorse out there in the last, I would say certainly in the last year, buyers that have purchased at the peak specifically, which somewhere around that April to June, depending on your market. I mean, some markets are still climbing, guys. I mean, I'm looking, one of the comments was, wondering what it was like in Reston, Virginia. I mean, I could, show you my screen. I mean, there are still, well, let's just do that. I'll just show you, I'll show you my screen on this. See if we can pull this up. Here we go. Let's see. There we are. All right. So this is Reston, Virginia. So I want you guys to know, I mean, there's a lot of markets that are, still overperforming this, little gauge here, strong sellers market for Reston, Virginia as a market index. You could see the median list price is $1.1 million. If we look at this chart here, it's going to give us a 7 and a 90-day running average. You could see that the 7-day average has a spike here, 1.1 million. And so there's, a lot of factors that go into this. But when you're looking at the median prices, you're talking about some of the highest in the country. And we are not seeing this market here in Reston, Virginia, showing signs yet of a decline. So when we're talking, there are still, I mean, there are folks you're seeing in your market where prices may not be cooling off and prices may still be going up. So, I understand it. And
one of the
what
things
that means right now,
when you look at those prices though, and I know I remember doing this back when we had the price drops back in the Great Recession, 2008, like Baltimore City, for instance, it looked like as an aggregate number, the prices were coming down. And they were. If you looked at average and median, they were. But if you looked at houses of like kind, you looked at a detached home versus a detached home versus instead of a townhouse versus a townhouse, you said, okay, what was happening was more people were buying the townhouses. So people were buying on the lower end houses. So the aggregate number came down because more of those were being purchased than the detached homes, which generally were more expensive. So if you did have a detached home, you could, even though people said, hey, prices are coming down, you still could say, well, wait a minute, that's an average of everything. That doesn't mean my house. So when an agent does a market analysis for you, it helps to see what's going on in the overall market, but you still got to look at that local neighborhood, that specific house. As they say, real estate is local, even and not just Reston is Reston, but even within Reston, there's local markets within that market.
100%. Yep, definitely.
What do you think, Todd, about this strategy? Interesting. We scored a great deal on a condo that was for sale. We offered to rent it for cheap since it was just sitting. They accepted. Is this something that,
So they did not buy it?
They did not buy it. They offered to rent it for cheap since it was just sitting, and they accepted their offer to rent. So what are your thoughts on that?
I think a lot of sellers are in denial. I think that what we're seeing is that there are a lot of people that don't need to sell. They're unwilling. They experienced what their neighbors or the building next to them was selling for, record high prices. And now they, are trying to determine, well, we're going to put this on the market but we're going to price it at this. And if it doesn't sell, we're not going to sell it. So I think that, this was probably just a situation. We may see more of this where if someone doesn't need to sell, a seller may decide that they're going to ride this one out. The problem is that we never know what that means. What does riding it out mean? So as a result, and you may be great tenants, but what a lot of people don't realize is that landlording is not easy in itself. So a lot of people will move into a house and the house will be destroyed. And they won't, they don't realize it yet, but now they have to, at the very least, repaint everything, put new flooring in, replace appliances because maybe they're banged up. And so now they said, well, I don't want to sell it for $40,000 less today. I'm going to wait. I don't know. How long will it be before prices exceed the peak? Will it be another 10 years? Nobody has a crystal ball.
Yeah,
but
if you look at houses from 2008 when they, or just before that, when they peaked, it took about 10 years once they crashed before they got back to where they were.
And some never recovered.
Right. So, and if you rented them in the meantime, like you just mentioned, maybe you had a good tenant, but odds are you had somebody that made you spend a few $1,000s to fix the place back up. So now you got a house that has not gone up in value and it's been destroyed by
my advice to a seller.
Renter.
My advice, my advice to a seller is, weigh the options. If you have equity in the house and it means dropping the price and unloading it, if you need to sell, unless you're planning on waiting for 10 years and you want to put a renter in there, and now you're going to deal with, more obsolescence, more deterioration, more cost to bring that home to market because it's not you living in it. Look, some owners are hard enough on a house and don't do anything to fix it up and live in it. And it didn't matter over the last couple of years. You could get away with not fixing anything, right? Sell it top dollar. I think these days are gone for quite some time, guys.
And now it may depend how long that seller has had the house. If you just bought it a year or two ago and you have to sell it, well, maybe you can't afford to sell it for less. Well, too bad. On the other hand, if you bought the thing 20 years ago, if you look at what I was talking about a little bit earlier, houses go up at, say, around an average of 4%. Where would you be if you just appreciated it by 4% every year? It probably won't be this inflated price that you're trying to get. It'll probably be something more reasonable, and you'll probably sell the house pretty quickly if you do it that way, and you'll come out just fine.
If you do it now, there are still a huge amount of buyers out there that will still probably be overpaying for your house. But another 3 or 4 months from now might be a different story.
Yeah, well, some people will always ask, when is the best time to sell my house? And of course, what they really mean is, when is it going to be at the peak? If you're wondering if there's going to be a peak, yeah, certainly over time, 10, 20 years, you'll see it higher than it is now. But if there's any such thing as a peak when there are ups and downs, if you don't think this is it now, then don't even think about it. I mean, what more do you need to have be told to you? You had 20% appreciation over the last couple of years. We're heading towards a recession. Interest rates are going up. Yes, interest rates are going up. Do you think the price of homes is going to continue to go up? Get real.
Yep.
At least in the short term, they're not.
Yep. You're right. Couple more questions.
Yeah. We have Renee Lopez. Grant Cardone recently said there will be no housing bust, as investors like myself will scoop them up. In your professional opinion, will the investors scoop these up and rent them out?
Investors typically always buy something at a lower price. And most of the investors that I work with buy them at a lower price. So yeah, they might scoop things up, but they're not going to keep that's not going to keep prices up. It's just going to bring prices down. I mean, if the market turns to one of primarily investors.
So Grant Cardone invests in apartment buildings too. So, a lot of, he's a big operator and, so you have to examine the source and where they're coming from. And Grant Cardone sells a lot of books too. And I can tell you that over the last couple of years, there will have been a lot of investors. Open door. Do you think they have any money? They certainly raise probably more money than it could be raised, right? So they're losing money. Their shares are down the tubes. They are dumping houses left and right. These are to be smart investors, right? So when you're talking about there will be no housing bust, I don't really know what that means. Because right now we're seeing an affordability bust. So is that a housing bust? People can't buy. We've seen sales drop off 40%. Some in some areas higher than that, where year-over-year sales have declined. We're seeing mortgage applications at a low that date back to like the 70s. What's a housing bust? We're seeing rent. Millions of millennials are moving back home because they can't afford to rent, right?
Right.
So they're moving back
when we
into
started the show, and
multi-generational housing.
when I started talking about a housing crisis, it is a housing affordability crisis.
Correct.
And if you can't afford it, that means you're not going to buy. If people aren't buying, what happens? I mean, it happens in no matter what the product is. They're not buying my product, lower the price. That's the only thing. That's the only option you have.
There is a simple 1% rule that most investors go by. Okay. And this is a real simple rule, guys. Investors have expenses too, right? They have to go in, they have to renovate a house or update a house. They have to have it licensed, right? They need insurance. They need to pay the taxes. Sometimes they pay the water bill and rebill it back to the tenant. Their maintenance costs, upkeep as time goes on. A 1% rule is if somebody pays $450,000 for a single family house, a 1% rule would mean that they can rent it for $4,500 a month. Good luck. Right. So when you're looking at, 0.7, 0.6% rule now, where investors are like, well, I can't get a 1% rule. So they're going lower on what they'll recoup. The upside is they're banking on property appreciation. Good luck. Right. So if these investors are going to jump in and they're going to scoop up these properties, unless they're of a scoopable value, right, that no one else wants, because let's remember, you have on the investor scale, it starts in the investor scale. You have a flipper, and I'm talking about educated flippers and investors. I'm not talking about the ones that just read the book and they're going out and try it out. I can tell you stories left and right. Ron, you and me can talk about a story that where an investor did just that, right? Just got into it, disaster. You have a flipper is at the bottom, right? They have to buy it for the cheapest because they're going to renovate it and sell it for profit. Next up comes the buy and hold guy, right? They're going to buy it, they're going to invest in it, they're going to rent it, and they're going to keep it as a rental. Then you have on top of that a retail buyer, a homeowner, right? There's still plenty of homeowners that once the prices dip down to a certain point to affordability, they're going to be more affordable than it makes sense for an investor. They're going to buy it first. So, the investors were spanked hard in this last run of competing with buyers. That's what, honestly, in my opinion, drove the price up. They were banking on these 20% returns on their investment. Open Door, that's what they were banking on, right? It's not happening. Didn't happen. Grant Cardone's a lot wealthier than me. So, listen to him. But I don't know. I don't think so. Let's take one more, then we'll wrap it up.
We got Robot. How many years can these rates stay this way?
For a long time. I mean, I think, we could be looking at 7% as a new norm. I think we might see 8.5% by the end of the year. I think it's very practical. It would make 7% seem like a rebate. I don't think we're going to see 4% rates again. That will require the Fed to reduce their rate, near, again, 0%, or certainly very low. And I don't see that happening either. I think we're going to see, the Fed rate, in my opinion, somewhere around 5%. Could be more.
I think one of the concerns is where a house's price is going to go. If you get an interest rate today and it's 7.5%, they can either stay there, go down, or go up. If they go down, you can refinance. If they go up, then you came out ahead, unless the value of the house came down. And that's what you got to consider. So you got to consider both things: where are interest rates, where are the price of houses, and we can only guess as to where either one is going to go. But we do have evidence that suggests the price of homes is probably, if nothing else, is going to be flat for a while and likely will come down.
All right, guys. Well, we really appreciate you watching tonight. And Ron, thank you so much for joining us.
Glad to
on
do it.
Tuesday night.
You did a great
definitely,
job,
Melissa.
Ron. It was awesome. It was awesome. Love the conversation. And Todd, I'm glad you made it on time.
Mm.
And yeah, it was great. It was awesome. Thank you all for all your comments and questions. There are so many, but we will be doing a follow-up video and answering some of the ones that we could not get to tonight.
I do want to plug, we have a new YouTube channel. It's called Real Estate Agent. It is somewhere on our channel. If you go all the way down to the bottom, if you're a real estate agent and you're watching tonight or watching this show after it's live, or anyone that likes to stay a little bit closer to the real estate agent side of things, a day in a life of a real estate agent, we have a new episode that will hit tomorrow. Rachel Smith, shout out to Rachel Smith. She is a local agent here to Carroll County. She's a RE/MAX agent, and she is going to talk about what it's like and starting her business and her road to success over the last 9 years. She's a rock star agent here locally in Maryland, but we will be interviewing agents all over the country for this show. So if you're even a mortgage loan officer or a title company or anybody that's serving and wants to know a little bit more about what it's like to be a real estate agent, or if you're considering getting your real estate license, or you're considering getting out because you're struggling, having a hard time making an income in this downturn, this would be a channel, guys, that will hopefully be there to help you, elevate you, encourage you. Guys, we're just very committed to the industry overall and providing value to our listening audience. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe. We love it when you do that. Hit the alert bell. We'll let you know every time we upload content just like this. We're live every Tuesday night. And, reach out. If we're here locally in Maryland, if you'd like to have Ron as your agent, as a buyer's agent or seller's agent, you're in Maryland or you're relocating to Maryland, reach out to Ron. He would love to hear from you. We'll make sure we drop all of Ron's direct contact information in show notes. And if you're anywhere outside of Maryland, guys, and you need an agent, you can reach out to us as well. We will be glad to connect you to our amazing broker network of people that have beliefs that align with ours. And so we love you guys. We thank you for spending your Tuesday night or whatever moment you're watching this after we're live. Until next time, have a great week.
See you
Thanks for
next
watching.
time.